Okay, now that I've got the primer bodies all welded, I typically take a file across the spot that I welded a few times just to make sure everything's flat and same length. And then I also run it across the face here a couple of times just to make sure that's flat so that we get a good seal up against the carburetor body. So now I'm going to install the O-rings. Oh, before that, I've already done it, but like I said previously, you'll need to cut a notch just in this last ridge. At least one. I did two, but just one. Just go all the way down to the main body portion of the plunger. Okay, so, and I'll include the part numbers for the O-rings that I use down in the description for this. So for the aluminum one here, use two smaller ones and a larger one on the center portion. The reason for the two different sizes is if you use all of the larger O-rings, the primer retracts very slowly and it's not fun to use. You have to wait too long. If you use all of these smaller O-rings, it doesn't seal up quite enough. So that's the reason for the two different sizes. So I've got the large one on this end and then the two smaller ones further down. So that's good enough on this one. You can put this back in. Spring first. And then I always use a little 2-stroke oil mix. Just, give the O-rings a fighting chance. We don't want to put them in there dry. And sometimes you gotta kind of work that larger O-ring in there. But it will go. Okay, so that's in there. Just like that. Moves freely. Okay, and then we're going to take another larger O-ring. And that is going to just go straight down in there. It doesn't look like it's going to serve a purpose, but trust me, it does. A little oil on that first. And then for reinstalling, I made tools out of an old one that I took apart to help install stuff. You can probably do the same thing, otherwise, the one that's going back in will probably work too. It's just, I have this laying on, so I'm not. Okay, and then we're going to put this in there. So this is the longer one, and make sure the narrower part here goes in first. You want that to go in first. Okay, and then I'm just gonna go press this in. You guys don't need to see that because it's basically the same way that you took it apart. Just squish it back in there. Only just push on the ledge here. Don't push this in. Push just the collar in there. Okay, so I got that pushed in there. I usually watch in this is the inlet hole. You'll see when you're pushing it in, you want that O-ring that butts up against the back side of here. You want that to be just past this hole this way. So you'll see it kind of coming in, and then it'll pass this hole, and you want it just right there. Right like this. You want that O-ring sitting right here. Just past it. You don't want it sitting over it, otherwise it's not going to let fuel in. And you don't want it back here, otherwise it's never going to seal it off. So just past it is where you're going to stop. Okay, so then we're going to take another large O-ring. Now this is the one that always leaks into the air box. If this goes bad, it's going to let fuel through into the air box. So take another one of these guys. push this outer collar in. Now you just want it flush with the body of the carburetor, or the carburetor primer. So I'm gonna do that quick, and then I'll come back and I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, so I got that all pushed in. This is what it looks like all done. Very similar to what it looked like when we first started. And then if it doesn't push this easily and spring right back, then you probably did something wrong. You got something hanging up, or something's bent, or maybe you used the wrong O-rings in the wrong places. I don't know. But it should be fairly easy push, and it should spring right back. Okay, and then so now I've got the new seat here that goes in there. So I always upgrade the spring. I put a heavier spring in because the springs that came factory in here don't hold any pressure. If anything goes wrong, they're gonna leak. It'll flood out the carburetor. It'll fill the air box. I haven't had good luck with the original springs in these, so I put a little heavier duty spring in there. That way it solves all of those problems. And the ball sits on the spring, and this is the new seat. So the seat, you can see this side is smooth, this side is not. The smooth side must go in first. The smooth part is where the ball touches. So we want the ball up against the smooth part. If you do it the other way, it's not going to seal right, or as well. And these are pretty tight to get in there. Sometimes you gotta work them in, but this one's slick. Okay, and then after you do that, I always pressure test it. I've got a little carb pressure tester here. It should hold at least 10 pounds. Ideally, you want this to hold more pressure than the carburetor will pop off at. The inlet lever will pop at. Close this, that's why that was working. Okay, so it's dry. It's not completely sealing, but you get the idea. You can see it hits, it's just about 15. Better, I'm not holding it. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, that holds over 10. And then also what I should show you, once this is all rebuilt, so this is a rebuilt one here, I always pressurize it from the inlet side here. This should hold usually they hold somewhere around 30 psi. Not that it has to hold 30 psi, that's just what my gauge goes up to, so I just pump it up usually. Yeah, so this is holding no problem. If it doesn't hold, it's gonna leak fuel potentially, or not pump fuel. So then the primer is not gonna prime. So this one's all good. Should be ready to put back in here. So then we've got to put the two O-rings here and put this back in the bracket that they go in here. Okay, that fits in there nice. And two more of those larger O-rings again. So there's only 2 O-ring sizes used in this whole thing. Pop those on there. Put this on. And then, let's see if I can show you this. But you can see the gap down here. So it's not as extreme as it's making it look, but you want some sort of a gap there before you screw it on, otherwise it's not going to compress those O-rings and it could leak. If this is sitting flat up against the carb body when you're just holding it there, it could leak fuel out of those O-rings. It'll lose prime. It's not gonna pump properly, and it'll flood out your air box, which is what we are trying to prevent. Screws in. Okay, so now you can see it's flat up against the body. It has compressed those O-rings somewhat, and you want to make sure that it does, because you don't want this thing flopping around. Eventually those O-rings are gonna, flatten out over time. So that's why we need to compress them all the way. And then, it should still pump. Sometimes you can hear it. Sometimes you can hear it, that ball and seat in there popping, but the best way to test is obviously with fuel. So I'm going to see if I can rig something up here quick to show you guys how much fuel it actually shoots out. So I'll see if I can be right back. Alright, now hopefully you can see this. I got just a syringe here that I put some fuel in. I'm going to try and push the primer. There you go. Hopefully you can see that, but it shoots quite far when they work properly. So that is how I rebuild these primers. Maybe I'll do another video someday on rebuilding the actual carburetor, because those I've found a few tricks to get working properly as well. Hope this helps you guys out, and maybe you can rebuild one too.